Disclaimer. This episode contains graphic descriptions of violence that may be disturbing to some listeners. Please be advised.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to start over.
Wow.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
It's me. You already forgot
I'm
forgot
Taylor.
the order.
Go, Mandy. Come on.
I'm Mandy.
Hi, Amanda. And I'm yelling at Mandy because she just disinvited me to her future dinner parties.
Because you said you wouldn't come to my house
Because you are going to live out in the middle of nowhere.
it's Murfreesboro.
It's like 45 minutes away.
It's a long drive.
So far.
Y'all suck.
So this week's sponsor is Brandon Dukes.
Oh my
I know
goodness.
him.
All the
I've met him
way
before.
from England. He's
Wow.
in the Air Force. He's over hanging out with a bunch of sheep up on a an Air Force base in England, and he decided to send us a bottle of wine.
Thanks,
And,
Brandon.
Yeah,
It is
thanks,
called
Brandon.
La Boulangerie.
That's
Sounds
dirty.
French though.
Very
so
close to lingerie.
It sounds like lingerie. That's
like
weird,
that.
Brandon. I don't know why you would get us this wine.
God, Brandon,
That's
it's a
my
little
brother.
weird. Anyway,
He's not our brother, though, so
But we
that's
love
okay.
you for sending us wine.
thank
Yes.
you.
And all the other
Pop it.
reasons, like being a human being, and you're wonderful.
We don't love you just because you're a human. We love you because you're a good human.
Oh yeah, you're a wonderful human. Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
We're gonna get another one of those?
Do I have to save the day again?
Oh, got it.
That was great.
I think it
It
worked.
was good. What a nice pour.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, is that mine?
You get the first one?
Thanks. This is a really good wine. Yeah?
Ooh. It's really
Ooh.
good. Oh.
Oh,
I've never had such
wow.
like a quick
Gee.
reaction.
Yeah, that was
Yum.
big. Yum.
Yum. That's delicious.
That was really good. I
What
would
is
pair
it?
this
It
with
tastes like a cab?
sushi.
Ooh, yeah.
No, I'd pair it with chocolate cake.
We've
What
already
is
had
this?
that though.
What is this
Oh, what do
wine?
you mean?
Like, what type of wine is it?
Let
Tastes
me
like
tell
a
you.
cab.
It is a cab. 100% pure Cabernet Sauvignon. Vin de France.
Basically a sommelier.
It says... What?
She could be on the next
I'm a som.
next
basically.
next
yeah.
Netflix
I'm like,
special. Tastes like a cab.
Cabernet.
Celebrate pure Cabernet Sauvignon from its native home in balance with the spiciness of French oak and richness of fully ripe fruit. American and French friends crafted this wine in a spirit of a bakery or boulangerie. That must be what a bakery is. A boulangerie in French. Ha! Where bread and wine are essential parts of the daily
So
life.
this goes with
I would
bread.
do this with French fries because we're Americans and
we
they're
eat
French.
French fries
fries.
with everything.
Yeah.
Oh, I just found a spot on my knee that I didn't shave.
I hate that.
Me too. Usually
That's
it's like
upsetting.
a big strip though, like a runway.
No, it's just one little spot. It's all right. Now I know what it is.
All right. So, pop culture today.
So
What are we
good.
going to talk
This wine
about?
is
It's
great.
not me, so it's you guys.
We decided that it might be fun
I think
to
we decided on the right thing. I
Oh,
don't
gosh.
even remember. It's
to
been...
cover the broad topic of folklore.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
good. Yeah,
Oh
we're
my
on the same
god,
page. We
I
decided
love
on the same one.
folklore.
And we might just like
We're probably
cover
gonna have to
portions
do,
of it,
yeah.
and then we'll have to do it another
We'll
time
have to do
with
like
more
parts
specific.
for this. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because there's so much.
there's so much. Like
I have the
didn't
Brothers Grimm
realize.
book.
I didn't realize how much the term folklore actually covered.
Yeah.
Like it's everything.
Like legends,
like-
myths.
It's even saying.
So
Yeah.
I found the definition for fairy tales, legends, folklore, and myths, which I'm sure that you probably also went into definitions somewhat.
I only
but-
just did the one definition of folklore. You're an overachiever.
Oh, well, here I am. Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm an overachiever. Yeah. So because it's such a broad topic.
Yeah,
It's
it
really
is.
hard to just narrow it down. And I was like, what are we going to talk about? So then I figured if I just like went off on like a tangent about it,
Then you would just know everything.
Yeah.
And then be like Amandapedia.
spoiler alert,
Amandapedia.
they're
Live up to your
all
name.
basically the exact same thing,
Oh,
but with little minute details that are different.
okay.
So tell us about
Okay.
it.
So I'll start with fairy tales. The phrase once upon a time implies that a story is presented above or outside of time as we see it or know it currently. The word fairy tale alone gives us a clue that the story is not true because the word fairy implies that it is make-believe, pretend, or fantasy. Yes, there are people that believe in fairies, but I'm not going into that. And in some cultures, their fairy tales do not have a happy ending, providing moral teachings rather than entertainment. Which I think that
like
we should-
Aesop's fables.
I don't know what that
Or like
is.
Hansel and Gretel, like don't go into strangers' houses that are offering you candy
Because they'll eat you.
because they'll eat you in the oven.
Yep. In the oven. They'll eat you in the oven.
So that brings us into legends. And legends are stories that have to be at least 20 years old or more and are based on a real individual that can be proven to have once lived. Davy Crockett.
Yeah.
He
With
had
the
a
coonskin hat.
Yeah, he had a reputation for being king of the wild frontier due to television movies and cartoons, but historical documents state differently. But either way, like he was a real person. They just like have made a legend around him.
Or like Johnny Appleseed.
Was he a real person?
Yeah, he was a real person.
Okay. Yeah. So that's
The one with the
yeah.
apple that fell on his head and he proved gravity or something.
No, Johnny Appleseed, I believe,
he
planted trees. What are you thinking of?
I have no idea. I guess I'll have to do some research because I don't even know what I'm talking about right now. Ignore me. Go on.
And folklore is a story that is based more regionally. However, with the invention of printing presses and later on radio, TV, and now the internet, many local folklore are now shared worldwide and get turned into legends.
It was Isaac Newton, by the way.
Oh, okay.
He had
Not
the
Johnny
apple.
Appleseed.
I guess I just related the apple because he was sitting under an apple tree and one fell on him and he was like, "Why do things fall?
Gravity.
Gravity." Anyway, onward.
Folklore is sometimes considered gossip that's gone on and on and on about someone. In some cases, folktales can turn into sagas, as each generation feels a need to add their version or spin to it. This is why many folktales have wandered further from the original truth as the years have passed. Myths are a bit different because they not only can be about people, but also non-living things. You don't necessarily have to believe the myth to be true to tell about it.
There's like a Devil's Tower. Have you ever been to Devil's Tower? In South Dakota / Wyoming?
I
Can't remember.
literally just learned about that yesterday.
Oh,
One
the
of my
legend
clients
of
was
the
telling
bear.
me about it.
the bear that made all the striations down the side of it.
No, we were just talking about things that were in South Dakota.
Interesting.
What is the myth?
The
legend, what is
legend, whatever it is that the native people were being hunted by this bear that was like the size of a mountain. This bear was, and so they climbed up to the top of this mountain, and the bear couldn't reach them, so he was trying to claw his way to them and like to kill them or whatever. And these people were battling this big bear, and he scraped down the side of the mountain with his big claws, and he left all these. Do you know what it looks like? What Devil's Tower looks like?
I've never heard of Devil's Tower in my
I
life.
didn't either. It's in the movie. There's a movie of the third kind. What is that movie? The
fourth kind?
No, not that
The
one.
12th kind?
No, there's it's the we just talked about it yesterday. It's like the
I wasn't there.
Invasions of the Third Kind or something. It's like an old 80s alien movie.
Oh.
Invasion of the 12th kind.
No, I know what you're talking about. I didn't know that it was in that
people are
movie
gonna be
because
mad.
We're going to
to
get
it.
emails
Yeah, they're
about
gonna-
that.
But yeah, that's the legend, is that the bear made all the... I'll show you a picture of it with all the...
Scrapes,
It looks like scrapes, but it's really just the way that the rock is breaking away from itself.
Interesting.
Kind of looks like a loofah. Like,
Oh.
you know, like the like sponge loofah, the one that like stands up
Yeah.
like that. Looks kind of like
I
that.
don't
Interesting.
think it does, but
Like a sea cucumber.
like a like a sea cucumber.
So really, all in all,
They all sound
they're
super
all exactly
similar.
the same.
So what about
They're
this,
just a
though?
story.
What
all of
about
them.
superstitions?
They
Like walking under a ladder or breaking a mirror? Like, are those?
I can imagine that would be grouped in the same.
Yeah,
place
they would
too.
come from like a
It's like
folklore
word of
or
mouth.
something,
I
yeah.
think. Okay, so what I had, it's just folklore is traditional beliefs, customs, and stories of a community passed through generations by word of mouth. So it could be literally anything.
just any story.
They're all
Any
stories.
story, any custom, any
Right.
tradition, any like one of the stories that I found that was extremely short and I didn't realize would be grouped in with folklore is the saying knock on wood.
Yeah.
It belongs to German folklore. They believe that supernatural beings were thought to live in trees, and so they can be invoked for protection if you knock on wood. And people in
Wow.
Australia, in New Zealand, and in Great Britain, they say touch wood, but it means the same thing. But isn't that crazy?
I
That's
have
cool.
never looked up the meaning of that, and usually I'm like, oh, why do we say that? That's weird.
Supernatural beings
Knock on
are
wood.
in the wood, and we're like
Yeah, just
invoking
give us
them.
protection.
Yeah.
That makes
That's
so much
strange.
sense.
Yeah, it's weird.
Wow. Learn something new every day.
You do.
That's pretty interesting.
Can I tell you about my favorite folklore?
Yes.
Yeah,
That I
because I have a
found?
favorite folklore too.
I hope it's not the same one. Although I kind of hope it is the same one, so we can be like, you know,
Besties.
twinsies.
Yes.
I'll just be over here with my dog.
So my favorite story that I found was that of selkies.
Nope, not the same.
Have you ever heard of selkies?
Nope.
no.
Oh my gosh! Did you find it while you were
It
researching?
sounds like a sea monkey offspring.
You're kind of right, but
Is it like mermaidish?
Ooh, let me just tell you about it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So it is an Irish/Scottish folklore. That's where it's traditionally found. So it's pretty much seals who live out in the sea, but then sometimes they remove their skin and they come onto land as humans.
Like Ariel did.
Except they're seals and they're removing their skin.
Maybe the whole time she had her real skin off.
Kind of. I mean, okay, so they also said that they were, some of the female selkies were known to attract male suitors that were humans. And so they'd get married.
Like sirens.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, so they'd shed their skin, they'd come on land, and then they'd find a man that fell in love with
sing to
them.
them or anything.
And then they'd get married, they'd have kids, but it was said that the husbands had to hide their skin. They had to hide their skin from them because the Selkies' one true love is the sea. And if they were to ever find their skin, they would put it back on and they would go out into the sea and leave their family forever.
That is a bizarre.
It's so
Well,
weird.
okay, it kind of so in my mind it makes total sense because pirates believed that manatees were mermaids, and that's like where that came from.
Yeah.
And seals are like mini manatees.
Very similar.
So
Well, they said that people
Mini
thought
manatees.
that Selkies were humans who had drowned at sea. And one night a year they come in and have their day, you know.
I mean, it's kind of nice. It's a nice thought, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's not like, yeah, I can see, back then when they don't have Google, they couldn't be like, what is that? They like just decided what it was, and then they told other people about it, whether it was outlandish or not. They were like, oh, okay. Yeah, they're seals, and then they take off their skin.
But I want to know like what the first one was to make it seem that, like, where did this story start?
Maybe it was a beach seal that like looked like somebody had taken the skin off. You know what I mean? Like
Or
a whale.
like that looks like my wife. She must have got her skin.
Oh god. I wonder though,
Oh my
I
God.
feel like a lot of these had to have come out of someone's ass.
This dead seal looks like my wife.
I'm sure that people
Weird.
are like, okay, like
Let's
something
make up this
happened.
story.
So
I'm
yeah, let's
sorry.
make this story
Yeah.
out of it, and then
Like
it
they
just
don't
has become
actually
this huge
believe.
thing.
I don't know though.
But I think that if you tell someone a story enough, like maybe they'll start believing it.
Yeah, if they're gullible.
Or,
Wow,
I mean, I could
harsh.
tell you something. I could tell you something with like full, like you could have just made this whole story up, okay? But you sounded like you knew what you were talking about.
Yeah, because I wasn't even looking at my paper. I was like, "This is
You
the
were
best
staring
story
into my
ever."
soul.
And you're telling us a story, and we believe you
Yeah, I was
right
into
now.
it.
So, like, I could make up the next folklore
I
and
know,
tell
but
you guys
it's
about it. and
physically
it could be-
impossible
How do you not know?
for something to live in the sea and then live on
Right,
land.
I understand
lungs
that.
and
Like,
gills. Like what is that about?
But like, it's
They don't have
physically
gills.
impossible.
No,
to
they
have,
don't. But they live. These seals live in the sea. Normal seals live on the beach. It's a different thing. It's like a sea seal.
So maybe the first
seals
time
go
that they
in
saw,
the ocean, though. They like
yeah, they swim, but
Yeah.
they don't sleep in
maybe
the
the
ocean.
first time that they saw him, it was like when things were evolving to the point that they could be on land and in the sea. You know what I mean? Like they weren't just seabound.
You guys are so ridiculous.
What? It has to come from somewhere.
I just don't. I don't believe that it has ever been true.
I'm
But,
not
like-
saying a person shed their fucking
no,
their
I'm not
seal
saying
skin.
that it's true either. But like, there had to have been something for
Like
it
a
to
source.
start. Yeah,
Like Bigfoot, where
It's like-
people are like, "He's real."
Sure.
yeah,
or
but
like
I'm sure someone
aliens.
saw a Bigfoot in the.
That's
and
what
like,
I'm saying.
Yeah, like there's something that happened that they're like, yeah, that's totally what it is, and they make it into.
Or they're like, that's a shooting star, like a really close comet, and then people are like, aliens. That's an alien from another planet.
I'm pretty sure I've totally seen aliens before. But
Have you ever watched Ancient Aliens?
Yeah.
I want to be friends with that guy with the crazy hair. Aliens. Ancient astronaut theorists believe. Sorry.
There's sometimes where, like, with all the drones that are happening nowadays, now at times is what I was about to say.
Now at
Now at
times.
times.
You should have said that.
I should have. Okay.
But with a British accent.
Rewind.
Now at times.
So, like, I've been driving home and I see something, like, totally hovering, and I'm like, is that an alien or is it a drone? I don't know anymore.
No, we don't know.
No.
I kind of like the not knowing.
The unknown kind.
The unknown kind. I also like believing that aliens necessarily aren't like flying in from outer space.
But aliens had to come from someone,
I
too.
mean, I believe in aliens.
No,
I just
I
think
believe
that
in
they're not
aliens.
like green things. I
No,
think
they're
they're
like
look
little
just like us.
living in the ground
no,
or something.
I think that they look like bacteria and they're living on Uranus.
Wow.
I
Wow.
had
Third
to
grade
do it.
humor.
But
Man,
you know,
I'm
they're
such a
living on
child.
Jupiter or Mars
Here on
or whatever, and they're so small you can't even see them.
Uranus.
Even if you were there. Uranus is that
And
what
there's
you're
they're
supposed to
saying
say?
Uranus now because
But then
Because
that's
of
like
all
we
of
ruined
us.
everything.
It's just it should be Uranus.
Nope.
Did you come up
Nope.
with any other ones?
Oh yeah, I have a bunch. Do you want to say your favorite one?
Okay. My favorite one was The Legend of Bloody Mary.
Ooh,
Did you look at that one at
well,
all?
I skimmed that one, but I
I
don't have
do
it.
know the origin
So-
of this one.
There's multiples.
Okay.
So when I was a kid, we used to do this at like sleepovers where you go into the bathroom
in the dark,
and you
say it 3
like,
times.
yeah, and you talk into the mirror and you like
So
think that
scary.
she's gonna come and like either murder you or just scare the shit out of you.
Yeah.
With whichever one you want.
And we were like totally fine with that. By the
Yeah.
way. We're like, if we die, I guess that's how I go.
We did that. We
Bloody
did
Mary.
Candyman. We did like cat scratches. We did a
Oh.
bunch of different things as a kid
Well, I went
that
to
I would never
Catholic
do.
school,
Light as a
so-
feather.
Okay, so Bloody Mary.
So there's multiple theories of where Bloody Mary came from. There's a whole bunch of stories, and so the couple that I found that I thought were really interesting were there's a folklorist, Alan Dunes. He suggested that Bloody Mary is a metaphor for the onset of puberty in girls, describing both the fear of one's body changing and the excitement and taboo of the nature of sex.
That can't be it.
He's a dude, so
I know he doesn't
like,
get it.
he doesn't
Like-
know things.
Nobody was excited.
Yeah.
Okay. They're like, oh,
Let's
we're
do
going to have to
this.
do this for the next 65 years.
Others
Nice.
argue that the story is just the product of an overactive childhood imagination. Developmental psychologist Jean Piaget.
Perfect.
That sounded about right.
French.
Sounds way cooler than
We're drinking French
whatever it is.
wine. We're
Yeah.
saying French words.
Lingerie.
Hello, sugar.
Croissant.
Ooh, croissant.
Baguette.
Oh wait,
Parlez-vous
je
François?
souvenir, je dois. Des souvenirs, je sais sont éternels. I think I said something.
Probably.
It's a dream,
Hopefully
a
it's
little
not
dream
them.
of me in French.
Ah.
I probably
Don't get
didn't
fucking
say it right.
fancy on
but
me right now.
I'm just letting you know.
This is not a fancy
I'm
episode.
classy.
I wish I had a croissant
Get out of here.
right now.
Croissant sounds good.
Croissant sounds
like a
great.
cheese Danish.
But what I thought was really interesting was there was a whole nother story about it with the real Bloody Mary, which was the only
Wasn't it
daughter.
a woman who like lost her baby or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the one that I heard.
So she was the only daughter of King Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. And I remember researching this in like AP European history in my senior year of high school because
You're
I
so
was
smart.
like, this is so cool.
AP shaker.
Oh, hey.
Fancy.
I'm so fancy. Bloody Mary was a real name for Queen Mary I, and she was the only child of King Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, which they got annulled. Their marriage got annulled. I think she was the first wife of King Henry. I'm not going to say that positively. And so later he married Anne Boleyn, and while he was married to Anne Boleyn, she did this huge thing where she like tried to say that Mary was an illegitimate child, so that like she couldn't be the next to be in the throne. And then she gave him a daughter, and there's just like this, I mean, if you know anything about their history, it's like a super long thing. And but as Mary was a child, she like no one cared about her because she wasn't like the next in line. And when she was young, she had terrible menstrual pains and irregular cycles, which would be attributed to her eventual physical and psychological stress later in life. She also was struck with deep and frequent periods of melancholia, depressive spells, which would stay with her throughout her relatively short life. She's bipolar, basically.
Yeah.
Despite all the things that happened to her, she eventually did take the throne in 1553 at age 37 and promptly married Philip of Spain in the hopes of conceiving an heir.
Philip of Spain.
Yeah. Starved for love and forever seeking the approval of her father, Mary would replay this codependent pattern with her new husband, whom she was ready to lavish all her frustrated emotions on.
Frustration.
Lavish
So-
in the bedroom.
He was 10 years younger than her, and he like just did everything that he was supposed to do in marriage. And 2 months into their marriage, everything that Mary wanted happened, and she had a baby, or she was pregnant. Despite displaying the usual symptoms of pregnancy, including a swelling of the breasts and an ever-growing abdomen, the public remained suspicious of the queen's recent good fortune, and it didn't take long for rumors of a false pregnancy to start spreading. In a time without pregnancy tests and in which doctors could not examine a sitting monarch, only time would tell if these rumors were true.
Wait, so doctors couldn't examine a sitting monarch?
Apparently.
That's so strange.
Yeah. Long story short, she went into like this room by herself for like 6 weeks before her due date of May 9th. And she just waited, and then she never had a baby. And then they were like, oh, well, we miscalculated. So then they were like, okay, well, you're due in June. And then June came, and she didn't have a baby.
But did she have a big belly and everything?
Like, why
Hold on.
did...
So,
okay.
false reports started spreading across the country, with some claiming their queen had delivered a boy and others stating she had simply died in childbirth and that her swollen midsection were symptomatic of a tumor rather than her pregnancy. Despite the world of gossip growing around her, one thing could be confirmed. Around late May, Mary's belly began to shrink. So it did grow, like it got bigger, and then it like just started like
fat?
deflating. Well, she waited in this room area until like August, when she was like, okay, yeah, I'm not having a kid, apparently. And she believed that God was punishing her for failing in a mission she set out to achieve. And at the time of Mary's pregnancy, the people of England were divided between Protestants and Catholics. Mary, determined to unite her people under the true religion of the land, took action by signing an act shortly before Christmas in 1554 that would result in the Marian persecutions, in which an estimated 240 men and 60 women were sentenced as Protestants and burned at the stake, earning her the name Bloody Mary. To this day, the tale of Bloody Mary, Queen of England, remains one of the most infamous cases of supposed pseudocysis or phantom pregnancy. A rare and mysterious condition, pseudocysis, occurs, to put it simply, when a person so determined to become pregnant actually tricks their own body into believing that it is, hence the appearance of physical symptoms and even a discontinuation of the menstrual cycle.
That's insane in itself.
Yeah.
That you can trick your body into doing that.
Yeah.
Later,
episode.
she thought she was pregnant again, and then they were like, no, you're going through menopause, and then she died from having uterine cancer or
What's
ovarian
sad?
cancer.
What's so strange is when I was growing up and we were playing that game, I think the story that we passed around was Bloody Mary was this woman who her child got murdered or something.
Yeah.
Not that
That's
she
the one
was
we were thinking
not faking, but not actually pregnant, and there was never any baby. That's
There was
crazy.
an actually human
But there's
child.
also
Yeah,
the
I was
ones
thinking.
I've heard that Bloody Mary was going to come and either show up in the mirror with a bloody baby too, or she would steal your baby.
Oh, God.
If you had a baby.
That's scary.
I think that was one that we talked about.
And we were just yeah, let's try it.
Yeah, no big deal.
Let's
Why
do
not?
it. Yeah.
Let's summon
What's
this
the worst thing that could
invisible
happen?
devil.
Scream if you're dying.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you got?
So I also am a big fan of vampires. All the research that I came across said most of it was European folklore, and they stated that vampires were usually revenants of evil beings or suicide victims or witches, but they could also be a spirit possessing a corpse, or I guess someone who's been bitten. The notion of vampirism has existed for forever, pretty much. Cultures like Mesopotamia, Hebrews, Greeks, Romans, all had tales of demons which were considered precursors to the modern vampire. And what's funny is nowadays we all kind of think of them as, just because of Twilight, these white
Edward Cullen.
vampires that shimmer in, how he's got glitter in his skin and
I'm
shit.
a big
Dracula.
Yeah,
That,
I
the
don't think
old
Twilight
horror
is actually
films.
good vampires.
Yeah.
I picture more
Interview with a Vampire.
interview. Yeah, I was just gonna say that's my
That's a
favorite
great one.
vampire. I made Mark watch that recently. He's never seen it. It's on
What?
Netflix.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
I made Mark watch
Brad
it 2
Pitt,
weeks ago.
Tom Cruise. What's that girl's name? Kirsten Dunst. She's so cute. She's like
so
a little
good
girl.
in the movie.
It's so great.
All right, wow, you sold
So
me.
great.
Okay, so we'll watch that later.
Zorro, isn't it?
But so they weren't glittery and white and pale complected. Is that a word? Complected?
I don't think so.
I think you should just go with it though.
They had a
They didn't
pale
have
complexion.
They didn't have pale complexions. Back in the day, vampires were believed to be they had bloated bodies and they had ruddy or dark complexions because
They were dead.
they were dead and they were decomposing
Yes.
and they were drinking blood. So they were more purpley, I guess,
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting.
Purpley.
But in the 18th century, this caused hysteria, and there were public executions of people who they believed to be vampires. So I guess it's kind of,
Like a witch hunt.
yeah, it reminds me of, the witch trials and all that.
Yeah, I found things where archaeologists had found evidence of vampire burials. So the body of the deceased is pinned to the earth with wooden stakes or iron bars in countries such as Poland, Bulgaria, and the United States. These strange graves, which sometimes also feature decapitated skeletons or skulls with bricks shoved between the jaws, may have originated in the Middle Ages as early as the 11th century. And it's in Europe as well. But yeah, I thought that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I did find the decapitation thing. There were ways that you could make, if your loved one died, there were ways that you could make sure that they didn't become a vampire.
Yeah.
One of them was to bury them upside down in their grave. And then there's another one where you bury them with their earthly objects so it satisfies the demons that are trying to enter.
That goes back to like ancient Egypt.
And then also severing the tendons in their knees.
Didn't hear that one.
Or placing poppy seeds and sand around the grave so the demon would be preoccupied with the grave.
Distract the demon. That's a new t-shirt. Distract the demons. With poppy seeds.
I did also find that in Slavic and Chinese folklore, any dead body that was jumped over by an animal, most likely a dog or a cat, was likely to become an undead.
Oh, I saw that too.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
Or a body with a wound that wasn't treated with boiling water was at risk.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's very strange what
Very
they thought
strange.
like caused.
I also found that they believe that Dracula was a real person named Vlad the Impaler.
Impaler.
Vlad
Yeah,
the
Impaler.
Impaler. Or Vlad the Third. I like that one better.
I know a guy named Vlad.
A medieval Romanian prince who was also known as Dracula. But they don't believe that he actually drank anyone's blood, but he was ruthless and had a gruesome habit of impaling his enemies with pointy stakes.
Man.
Fun.
The only other thing that I came across that I was like, this is disturbing and I have to share it, was when they were talking about what can kill a vampire. There's the obvious like garlic and Bibles and crucifixes and silver and holy water, wild rose and mustard seeds. But then resistant cases, the body was dismembered, the pieces were burned, mixed with water, and administered to family members as a cure.
What?
I did
Isn't
hear
that
that one.
gross?
But I heard it was just like the one that I heard about on this podcast I'm going to tell you about was that they would remove the heart of their loved one and burn it over a fire and then pound it into a powder and then mix it with water and wine or something and then like with other herbs and stuff and then they would drink it to prevent themselves from turning into one.
Cheers.
Wow.
Wow, very sentimental.
Man, did you find anything else about vampires?
No, that's all that I had on vampires.
I had one more thing that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
About the
Origination.
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 Wow.
Coming up with words tonight.
Our Urban Dictionary, this shit.
Complected.
Complected.
Complected might actually
It's
be
not.
a word.
Complex.
Did you Google it?
I'm
No,
complex
but I'm
about
so
that
confident about it.
I'm about to Google it.
Okay.
Okay, anyway.
Originated.
My thing that I found that I thought was really interesting was the origin of zombies.
Guys, complected. Having a specified complexion, lighter complected invaders from the north. Thank you.
It
Please.
was not in the way that you used it.
Yes, it is. I said they were they were lighter complected.
She did say
I
that.
did say that. I used it correctly. I went to college.
Well, I fucking didn't.
Bum bum bum.
So that solves that.
Okay, so zombies. Zombies arose from the blending of old African religious beliefs and the pain of slavery that defined Haiti before it gained independence from France at the turn of the 19th century. In certain traditional African religions, people believed that a human soul can be stolen from the body and be bottled up for later use. But this idea took a much different form when it reached Haiti. Slaves who considered committing suicide to escape their miserable lives were constantly reminded by their overseers, usually other slaves who were sometimes also voodoo priests, that if they killed themselves, they might become zombies or walking dead with no souls who are bound to do the bidding of a mortal master. Zombies could never reach Guinea, which literally means Guinea, or West Africa, which is the final resting place, according to them. The modern concept of a zombie in Western cultures has diverted significantly from its Haitian roots, and nobody knows why they like to eat.
Significantly.
It was like, and nobody knows why they want to eat humans. But I thought that was really interesting.
That is. So I did only have one more thing, and it's super short, like, because I thought how could we talk about folklore and not talk about mermaids?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, both of you are mermaids. I am not.
You're kind of a
You
mermaid.
saw the ocean
Absolutely
for the first
not.
time this year, so.
No, second
We're
time.
all mermaids in our own way.
But
Nope, I hate
I'm
the
more
water.
fun.
So the ocean is the worst to me.
You're like Ariel when she's on land.
No.
Okay, so
I'm more like a manatee than a mermaid.
stop it. I'll be a selkie.
I'm a walrus.
Okay. Yeah.
So
We all, okay, sidebar, we don't think terribly of ourselves. We
No,
think
it's
it's funny.
just funny.
Like,
joking.
yeah, like I don't want anyone to be
It's
like,
a joke. You
you
see,
guys
it's
should-
funny.
you guys are beautiful. Yeah, we know we're beautiful. You don't need to tell us. Like, it's a joke.
So mermaids, thought to have been humans who were in love with sailors who died at sea, and their mourning had turned them to the sea, and that's how they, ended up being mermaids.
It's very sad.
That was one story that I found. But the other one was the very first story ever told about mermaids. It was a woman who unintentionally killed her lover, and she was so ashamed that she went to the sea and she took on fish form. But it all has to do with
How'd she
her
kill
lover
husband?
dying.
Yeah.
So
How
sad.
did she kill him? Does it say? No. All right. You can edit that out. Excuse my questions.
I literally was just like, I have to write something down for mermaids because I knew Amanda would do it.
I didn't
I'm
do
so
mermaids.
surprised.
I did do a little bit of werewolves, but it wasn't really that interesting.
Yeah, I think it's such a broad topic that it's
yeah.
really difficult to pin down,
Yeah.
specific things. So what do we got for crime?
I'm going to talk about Robert Andrew Berdella Jr., also known as the Kansas City Butcher or the Collector. Anybody heard of it?
I don't recognize his name, but then Kansas
Yeah.
City Butcher rings
And
a
the
slight bell.
Collector.
You might recognize.
Just
You might
yeah,
recognize.
Just go
it.
ahead.
Okay. Robert Andrew Berdella Jr. He was born on January 31st, 1949 in Cuyahoga Falls.
Cuyahoga Falls. Come on, that's where I'm from. Is he from
Where the
Ohio?
hell am I supposed to
You're
know
from
that?
so many places.
Yeah, you're from like
TT.
5 at least.
Cuyahoga
Also,
Falls.
Cuyahoga. He was born January 31st, 1949 in Cuyahoga Falls. Cuyahoga,
Cuyahoga.
Ohio, the first of 2 sons born to Robert Berdella Sr., a die setter for the Ford Motor Company, and Mary Berdella, a homemaker. Berdella's father was a Catholic of Italian descent and raised his family in a deeply religious household in which the family regularly attended Mass and both sons regularly attended religious education courses. As a child, Berdella was intelligent but a loner who rarely played outside of his home and seldom had friends to visit to socialize. He had a speech impediment and wore thick glasses from the age of 5 because he was severely nearsighted. He was also diagnosed with high blood pressure, for which he took several medications. In part because of this diagnosis, Berdella was largely unathletic, whereas his younger brother Daniel, who was born in 1956, displayed an aptitude for various sports from an early age. As Berdella's father valued sports and physical education, he viewed his older son's lack of interest in sports as a sign of failure, and often compared him to unfavorably with his younger brother. Occasionally, Berdella's father physically and emotionally abused his children and beat them with a leather strap. Berdella performed well academically, though teachers often found him difficult to teach, in part due to his aloofness and him being the recipient of bullying by other students. So resultantly, as a child,
He was the recipient of bullying.
Yes?
It's just a funny way to say it. You're a recipient of bullying.
He was the recipient of bullying.
I like
Seldom
that way.
socialized in social activities at school and with his peers. When Berdella reached puberty, he discovered that he was homosexual. Initially, he kept this fact a closely guarded secret and did not become open about his sexuality for several years. Nonetheless, in his early teens, he briefly had a girlfriend. By his mid-teens, Berdella began to display a degree of self-confidence which would often manifest itself with his attitude to other individuals, in which he would exert a somewhat rude and condescending attitude, particularly towards women. He learned about cooking and art and developed showmanship. On Christmas Day 1965, the Berdella family drove to Canton, Ohio, to visit relatives. That evening, Berdella's father had a heart attack, and 2 days later, Berdella returned to Cuyahoga Falls by himself. When he arrived home, his family told him that his father had died, He was only 39. In 1965, Berdella saw the film adaptation of John Fowles' book, The Collector, and that's probably where you've heard that.
I was like, I know that. It sounds like something.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
The plot of the movie revolved around a lonely male who stalks then abducts young women he finds attractive and holds them captive in his windowless stone basement. After several weeks, the female captive dies of a contracted illness despite her captor's efforts to keep her alive. Berdella later stated this movie had formed a long-lasting impression on him. In 1969, Berdella voluntarily withdrew from the Kansas City Art Institute after receiving harsh criticism from college administrators for killing, then cooking a duck for the sake of art. Having by this stage long been open about being gay, Berdella began spending much of his free time with male prostitutes, drug addicts, petty criminals, and runaways. These individuals he would typically befriend, then try to help free them of their drug addictions, and then he was adamant that throughout much of the 1970s that he had no physical contact whatsoever with these individuals. His neighbors stated that he gradually almost felt like a foster parent to many of these youths. Reminds me of Schmidt from New Girl.
Oh, yeah.
Youths. Okay, so despite these later claims to investigators, Berdella would often engage in sexual relations with several of the individuals that would board at his house with him. He would establish a degree of control over them, in part to engage in these sexual relations with methods including loaning them money and allowing them to live rent-free at his house for periods of time.
But it's not rent-free because they're paying him in sexual favors, yeah?
Yes. But free
free of monetary. Yeah, okay.
Nice. Words that we use.
Good one.
To his neighbors, Berdella was considered a flamboyant yet helpful and civic-minded individual despite the general unkept state of his property. Beginning in the late 1970s, Berdella would assist in the organizational activities in the South Hyde Park Crime Prevention and Neighborhood Association, becoming the chairman in the early 1980s and encouraging neighborhood watch patrols.
Of course.
That's interesting since we're
all
talking
the good
about
guys.
crimes. I have a feeling that he's going to turn into a murderer.
Well, you'll see.
It's either that or he gets murdered, but I feel like we wouldn't be going this deep
exactly.
into this.
Yeah.
He remained active in this association until the mid-1980s when he relinquished his position in the organization. Berdella would also represent his neighborhood at fundraising events for a local public television station, although he would disengage himself from these events by the mid-1980s.
Also, can I just go back to how good this wine is?
It is very good. That's
really
why I
delicious.
chugged it, and now I need to stop.
Oh, man.
Yum, yum. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Brandon.
You best.
In 1982, Berdella began renting his own booth at the Westport Flea Market. The store was named Bob's Bazaar, and he sold and traded primitive art, jewelry, and antiques. The income he typically generated via the business was often not sufficient to maintain his daily expenses to make ends meet, resulting Berdella would occasionally have to either sell goods to fellow merchants or steal and scavenge for items to sell at his booth. At his work premises, Berdella became acquainted with a fellow merchant named Paul Howell, who operated a booth adjacent to his own. Soon, Berdella became acquainted with Paul Howell's younger son, Jerry. Initially, Jerry Howell and his friends scathed and taunted Berdella over his overt homosexuality, although according to Berdella, Jerry Howell later confided in him that he and his friends occasionally earned money as male prostitutes. By the early 1980s, Paul Howell had relocated his business from the Westport Flea Market to a store within a building located close to the intersection of 39th and Main Street. His family had also moved into an apartment above the shop, and despite his younger son occasionally engaging in heated arguments with Berdella, they would invariably reignite a casual friendship, often Berdella offering his legal or financial advice or assistance should Jerry endure minor scrapes with the law. By the summer of 1984, Jerry Howell had turned 19. Berdella is believed to have killed his first victim on July 5th, 1984. His first well-known victim was 19-year-old Jerry Howell, with whom he had become closely acquainted with, and whom he had abducted on the promise of driving the youth to attend a dancing contest. He lured Howell with alcohol and Valium and other drugs, both in his car and at his house, until he became unconscious, and then injected Howell with a heavy tranquilizer before binding him to his bed. He kept him restrained to his bed for about 28 hours. And throughout this time, he drugged, tortured, raped, and violated him with foreign objects, repeatedly ignoring Howell's questioning why he was being treated this way. Before his death, he either asphyxiated on his own vomit, or the combination of the gag and the medicines were too strong for him to be able to catch his breath. And that was a quote from his journal that you'll find out that he kept about all of his victims.
Oh God, that's like sociopath style.
He would later state that he briefly attempted CPR on him, which is super weird. And then after Howell died, he suspended his body above a large cooking pot in his basement and made several incisions to his inner elbows and jugular veins before leaving the body suspended in that position overnight to allow all the blame.
All the blame. You gotta let all the blame out.
To allow all of the blood to drain from his body.
Oh, you just put blood and drain together.
Yeah, blame. Yeah.
New word.
Okay,
Yeah.
so really quick, what I don't understand is how, like, I mean, I do get it because he didn't want him to die, but because he wanted to, like, do whatever.
Yeah, he wanted to keep it going. He wanted to keep him forever.
But what I also don't understand is how he went from, like, I want to keep him alive to, oh, no big deal, let me drain his blood.
Well,
like,
such a quick, like,
him.
decision.
I suppose it was like he's like, okay, well, he's gonna die. He died.
I guess I gotta get rid of him.
I guess I have to get rid of him. Which then he ended up dismembering his body with a chainsaw and boning knives and wrapping it in newspaper and trash bags.
What's crazy is back then they didn't have Google. He couldn't be like, how to get rid of a body.
No, he just had to be off the
He was
cuff.
just like, let me just like use this boning knife.
That he just had handy.
Yeah.
Who doesn't hear a chainsaw? Like, do people not think that that's weird?
I don't know.
Maybe
I don't like
Like,
it.
think
I don't
about
like it.
Just
I
right
think
now,
the
if you were
chainsaws
in
are
your
weird.
townhome and you're like, you faintly hear a chainsaw in the
Oh my
background,
God,
what
I
would you do?
immediately think murder.
Yeah, I would definitely think of
Really?
murder.
Because I would be like, oh, someone's trimming their
sure.
tree in their front yard.
Yeah, but
her-
we have
Yeah,
like,
townhome.
not in my townhome because we have landscapers.
So you might think it was the landscaper doing it.
Nope.
It depends on the day.
It'd probably be at night.
I know what time. Yeah, I guess I'm picturing all of this happening at night because I think that's
scary.
when murder happens.
Yeah, it's always at night and
But,
it's
like,
always raining.
Yeah, that's literally what
Yeah,
my picture
that
is
is,
in
yeah,
my mind.
yeah.
Like, it's not like
Thunder
a
and
2:00 on a
lightning.
Monday.
Yeah.
Like, that's not how this works.
Yep.
So, okay.
So anyway, he put it in trash bags and put it out for the garbage crew to take to the landfill, which I guess they'd never noticed body-shaped bags.
Well, I guess if he cut him up, it wouldn't look like a body
They're
anymore.
probably pretty heavy.
Yeah, that's true.
And then later, when he was questioned about Howell's disappearance, Berdella claimed that he got him to his intended destination. So he hadn't seen the kids since he dropped him off or whatever. He did keep a very detailed log, which he documented all of the sexual and physical torture that he inflicted upon his victims. As of right now, he just had the one.
Is that a masochist or a sadomasochist? Do you know the difference?
I don't. I would have to look it up.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know either. I was going to be like, yeah.
One of them.
Yeah.
Well, a sadomasochist is one that likes to be
hurt themselves
and hurt other people, right? Like,
well, masochist. Yeah, I guess a masochist enjoys like pain and whatever.
and then a sadist likes to give people pain, and so a sadomasochist would be the one that likes both.
Okay.
Well,
I don't know
because
if
he
that's
did say
actually real.
about
pretend
I'm gonna
that's
say
it.
that. I know,
later
thanks.
to investigators, he did say that he kept the he kept the log, and then he ignored the pleas, the taunts, or he would like threaten his victims, and that was for his own physical and mental satisfaction. So I guess whatever that categorizes him.
There are
as.
some weird people in this world.
This is one of them. So, second victim, Berdella, he used to know this guy named Robert Sheldon, who was a 23-year-old, and he used to stay at Berdella's house, and he kind of considered Robert Sheldon as an inconvenience. And he even admitted that he wasn't physically attracted to him, but he ended up choosing to drug and hold him captive.
I mean, sometimes it's just easier to go after certain people.
Wow.
Like if they come to your door you know, and
Like,
knock
literally
and, like,
offering
Can I
themselves.
stay at your home
Yep.
where I sleep and am vulnerable while I'm like my eyes are closed? You know, like.
And he said also, because he didn't actually like Robert Sheldon and he was more of a convenience sake, he took out he expressed some of his anger and frustration that he had toward other people on Robert Sheldon. So he kind of just used him as a punching bag, but worse. So some of the torture that he endured was he was drugged with sedatives and held on the second floor bedroom for 3 days. And he was tortured with swabbing of drain cleaner in his left eye.
What?
The insertion of needles between under his fingertips, which just gives me the heebie-jeebies. And the binding of his wrists with piano wire with the intention of permanently damaging the nerves in his hands. And then he also filled his ears with caulking to reduce his hearing capacity.
Caulking?
Yeah. He just squirted caulk into his eardrums.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so messed up.
So he was only there for 3 days, and then a workman came to perform some work on the roof of Berdella's home. So he kind of panicked and he fatally suffocated Sheldon by placing a bag over his head, and then he tied it off with a piece of rope. And then also dissected or dismembered Sheldon's body on the 3rd floor bathroom. This is a pretty big house, by the way.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's a big house.
Yeah, I'm assuming that was like an attic or something.
Wait, did
But
you
there's a
say what
bathroom.
he did for a living? What does he do?
He had the shop that he sold like antiques. And,
Oh, that's right.
yeah, and then he helped
He's
like
got a nice house.
yeah, he like helped the community and shit. Like it was crazy.
He was an upstanding gentleman.
Yeah.
So it appeared.
That's what they all are.
The following June, so that was in April, just a couple months later, Berdella found Mark Wallace, who was hiding in Berdella's tool shed to seek shelter from a very severe thunderstorm. And again, like in the case of Robert Sheldon, Berdella invited him into his house and just noticed that Mark Wallace was just super tense and depressed and everything. And so he offered to inject him with this drug that he said would calm him down. And Wallace willingly accepted it. And then 30 minutes later, Berdella decided to render him a captive. So again, it was just like for convenience sake, I guess, because they
Like,
were right
since you're
there.
here.
Yeah, while
I
you're here,
guess.
let me
Let me
just
give you some drugs.
ruin your life. He carried him to the 2nd floor bedroom, and he was only there for a day. He would attach Berdella would attach alligator clips to his nipples to facilitate electrical shocks to his body, and Wallace began regressing to a state of unconsciousness. According to Berdella, an hour after his experimenting with hypodermic needles by inserting them into muscles in the victim's back, Wallace died through a combination of the drugs, the gag, and the lack of oxygen. And then he noted in his log that the victim's time of death was 7 p.m. on June 23rd. So Mark Wallace died on June 23rd. So in September, Berdella answered a phone call from an old acquaintance named James Ferris, who had asked to stay at his house for a little bit. He actually accepted this with specifically intentions to kidnap Ferris. So this one, he actually meant to do this. He arranged to meet at a bar later that evening. Despite the brutality to which he'd subjected his first 3 victims, Berdella claimed that Ferris was the first victim whom he intentionally inflicted torture. So this time, he meant it.
He planned it.
He planned it. He knew what he wanted. So
The
that
other
makes
ones
it.
were just like he was figuring.
He was just
it
he was
out.
experimenting.
Yeah.
Just the fact that he like acknowledged that was like his plan.
Yep.
Makes it even worse to me.
And he probably logged that in his little journal, his little diary.
Ugh.
I can picture like him having like a little like lock on his diary, like in his bedside table, like a little teenage girl.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't like this guy.
sorry.
No. You're trying to make him human to me right
I know.
now.
at some point during his last 3 victims, or his final 3 victims, he stopped actually making additions to his logs because he just assumed the victims wouldn't be able to make it. So he just stopped recording what he was doing because it was so awful. He was like, these people aren't going to live. Which is
Which you would
disturbing.
think that would be the reason why he would keep the journal, because he knew they weren't going to live, right?
I don't think that the dying part, the killing part, was
What he wanted?
what he wanted. I think that was
Interesting.
just something that had to happen eventually.
Huh.
I think the torture part was what he was all about.
Yeah.
He brought Ferris home and drugged him and crushed tranquilizers in a meal. Don't eat Hot Pockets with sociopaths. Is that what you said?
I said
lean
don't
cuisine.
Eat lean cuisines with strangers.
Hot Pockets with sociopaths or lean cuisines with strangers.
Don't do either.
Don't do any of it. You're probably going to die. So he tied Ferris to the bed and he tortured him for almost 27 hours consistently. He shocked him with 7,700 volt electrical shocks to the shoulder and testicles for up to 5 minutes in each instance, and acupuncture with hypodermic needles. So yes, the hypodermic needles are used
Oh,
in acupuncture.
okay. So I'm not a crazy person.
Well,
Just
he would put those in his neck and his genitals.
Oh.
Ferris eventually became delirious, but Berdella continued the physical and sexual assaults until he noted that in his log that Ferris was unable to sit up for more than 10 to 15 seconds, and he had very delayed breathing. And then he noted, with the slang term that he used in his career as a chef, he 86'd, which Berdella later explained that
Yeah, when you
It's
86
Yeah, he's
something at a
done.
restaurant, it's out.
he done.
He gone.
Okay, so he died. Enter Todd Stoops. He was a drug addict and sometimes a prostitute who, alongside his wife, had lived with Berdella in 1984. After Stoops and his wife moved out the second time that they were staying with Berdella, he didn't see them until a chance, quote-unquote, chance encounter at Kansas City Liberty Memorial Park on June 17th. And then I guess Stoops needed drugs, and so he offered sexual favors.
What did his wife think about that?
She was on drugs too.
Yeah, I'm
I guess
sure
that's true.
she's like, whatever you gotta do, babe.
I've been watching Shameless. There's a lot of things that they do for drugs.
There's a lot of things they do for drugs. Berdella would later stress to investigators that he was physically attracted to Stoops, and that victim was held captive for 2 weeks before he died. He gradually wanted to increase the terror just to make him more cooperative and incapacitated. He also used him as a sex slave as much as he could and used electrical shocks through his Stoops' closed eyes in an attempt to blind him. And then he also injected drain cleaner into his larynx to try to silence his screaming. Some week during the second week of his torture, Stoops had asked Berdella for a drink and a sandwich. Berdella refused, and Stoops burst into tears. And on June 27th, Berdella ruptured Stoops' anal wall with his fist, causing bleeding and discharge. Towards the end of Stoops' captivity, he tried to feed him ice cream and soup.
He just wanted a sandwich.
Right.
I don't know why he
Yeah, he
didn't just give him a
Yeah.
sandwich.
How was he
Just got
keeping him
pissed
alive
off.
without giving him
Jerk.
food?
He wasn't able to keep anything down. And so he became super weak, and he wasn't able to breathe while he was even sitting up. And then July 1st, 1986, Stoop died. And later on, the forensic pathologist would testify that the ruptured anal wall caused septic shock, which that's how he died.
So
That's
is
a really
this,
disturbing way to go.
oh yeah. Ugh.
This is what?
Is this a full year after the first death? Because this is July
Yeah.
again? Okay. I just need timelines.
Yeah, this is a year.
Okay.
I mean, in total, he had 6 victims, I think. 6 over a year and a half or so. So it's just like a spree kind of thing, but like a drawn out spree.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a thing. Okay, so then the next spring, he didn't do anything until the next spring. In 1987, he became friends with a guy named Larry Wayne Pearson. This began because Pearson came into Berdella's shop and then expressed that he had a interest in witchcraft and wizardry, which I hope isn't a bad thing.
Hashtag Harry Potter.
Hashtag HP for life. Pearson temporarily stayed with Berdella and was willing to do chores around his house as a means of paying rent. So initially Berdella didn't mean to capture this guy. But these guys are like walking into his life.
They're just randomly
unknowingly.
like giving themselves. They're like,
But they don't know.
Terrible time.
yeah, they don't know. That's why you can't trust
not-
anybody.
They don't know.
Oh my gosh,
So-
I'm in your house right now.
I know, right? Willingly.
This podcast is a ruse. We're gonna steal you.
I will willingly live with you.
Help. Is this thing on?
Taylor's like, I'll edit that out. Oh my god.
It's funny because it's true. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, this is the most evil laugh. This is a horrible thing to be like. We're busting out laughing in the middle of these horrible murders.
No, this is a comedy
Okay.
/ crime podcast, so it's okay.
Is that what labeled on Spotify? Comedy / murder.
Crime.
Okay. So he met Larry Pearson. Larry was a fan of witchcraft and wizardry.
Yeah, he's living in his house.
Just living in his house,
Doing chores.
doing chores. You guys listen. It's
Yep.
nice. Later one evening, Berdella, he noticed that Pearson became intoxicated, so he ended up injecting him with some drug, and moving him down to the basement. And he bound Pearson's hands above his head and then tied him to a brick column. I guess I would assume like a stove kind of thing down there. And then he also injected Pearson's larynx with drain cleaner, and then brought the electrical transformer down to the basement because he wanted to electroshock him as well. According to Berdella, Pearson was by far the most cooperative of his 6 murder victims. On the 5th day of his captivity, having by this stage endured tortures such as repeated administration of electrical shocks and breaking of several hand bones with an iron rod to render him submissive, he sort of was like thanking Pearson for his trust, I guess, and for going along with everything. So as a reward, Pearson was moved to the 2nd floor, with Berdella first telling Pearson that if he continued to cooperate, he wouldn't inflict as much pain upon him as he had done so while he was in the basement. The later part of 6 weeks of his captivity, Pearson tried to train himself to sleep without moving so that he wouldn't piss off Berdella and then get put back in the basement for more torture. So
6 weeks though.
6 weeks,
That's longer than anybody else.
yeah. Everybody else was like
A couple days.
a couple days or a day.
So he
I guess
probably
this
was
guy
like,
was
I
just
finally like
cooperative.
made it. I got.
Yeah. So 6 weeks later, Pearson's super desperate, and during a sexual act that he was forced to perform on Berdella orally, Pearson bit into Berdella's penis before screaming that he couldn't continue to tolerate being treated in this manner.
Did he bite that shit off? Because
No, he did
Because
not.
he gotta like clamp it and you gotta like yank it.
Nope.
I
get
saw
that-
Hostel.
What about that? Like, what about that woman who like cut off her husband's penis and drove
'Cause
off
he,
and
like,
like
cheat
threw it
or
out the
something.
window?
Yeah.
like
She
on the
tossed
curb.
it. They found his penis later, I think.
Did she get fined for littering? Yeah. That's a terrible high
It's
five.
That was a
biodegradable.
bad high five, but that was a good joke. I'll give you that.
Sometimes I get really excited about the jokes that I make, and then I'm gonna laugh about this later. Like
You're gonna be like,
she got
"Oh,
fined
yeah,
for
that's
littering. Yeah.
Manny's
Okay,
like, no,
so-
because it's biodegradable.
Okay. So got his penis bit.
Tennis bit.
And of course, this pissed Berdella off, so he bludgeoned Pearson with a tree limb, and then he suffocated him with a bag and rope before driving him to the hospital to receive treatment. Oh, for his penis.
Oh, I was about to say.
Yeah, no.
He didn't. He like killed the guy.
He killed the guy, and then he went to the
he went
hospital for his
own
bite
penis. Okay.
on his
Okay.
penis.
Should have been cut off.
Later on, he dismembered Pearson's body in the basement, and then his head was first stored in a plastic bag in Berdella's freezer, but then he decided to bury it in the backyard. Okay, so March 29th, 1988 at 1 a.m., Berdella abducted his last victim, who was 22-year-old male prostitute named Christopher Bryson. And he got him into his house pretty much on the promise of payment for sex. So he was just doing his thing still. In Berdella's house, Bryson was knocked unconscious with an iron bar and then also bound to Berdella's bed, where he was subjected to similar methods of abuse and torture. Berdella continually swabbed his eyes with ammonia before exclaiming to him, quote, I know.
I do hair color, so like just
I wear
even
contacts,
the smell of
and if I
ammonia.
get like
eyes,
a dirt little particle in my eye,
Yeah.
it hurts.
Like sometimes the smell of mixing hair color
burns your eyes.
it makes me close my eyes just because of the smell sometimes. I can't imagine having like actual ammonia just
Poured in your eyes.
oh.
And he did this and then exclaimed to him, quote, "The only things you need to think about are you, me, and this house." Which is disturbing. What's his face? Bryson was held for several days, and then Bryson said that Berdella began to trust him. Although he was willing to discuss parts of the abuse that he was receiving, there would be no negotiations pertaining to his sexual abuse. So he was just going to keep doing that no matter what. Berdella finished the discussion with a stern warning of, "I've gotten this far with other people before, and they're dead now because of mistakes they made." So this is a huge threat. On the third day that Bryson was captured, he earned a bunch of trust from Berdella, and he actually persuaded him to tying his hands in front of him instead of above his head after the sexual abuse. And then he also persuaded him to leave a television in the room and the remote control between his legs when Berdella was out of the town or out of the room or out of his house. And he eventually broke free of his restraints by burning them using a book of matches that Berdella accidentally left in the room. And he tried to he jumped out the window.
Yes.
Broke a bone in his foot, and all he was wearing was a dog collar around his neck.
Oh, God.
And then he flagged down somebody on the street, and they called the police. So Bryson got taken into police custody. So he talked to investigators, and he told them all this stuff about Berdella, who kidnapped, raped, and tortured him for 4 days, and then he escaped through the window and everything. And then he had those swollen eyes and everything, and the welts across his body. So everybody was like freaking out, and so they took him to the hospital. And then the Kansas police, the police department, just held surveillance on his house until he came home. He was eventually arrested, and Bryson told police about photographs that he found, Polaroid images of guys who were taken and tortured, and then some of them were dead in the photographs. And this was his unsuccessful attempt to collect sexual slaves. So I guess that was his motive.
That's why he's called the
for all
collector.
this. So yeah, them dying was not part of his plan.
He
but
just
I
wanted
guess,
to like torture them to like get them to listen to him, and then torture them for like the fun that later
and have them just for sexual things.
Ugh.
Berdella was eventually arrested on charges of sexual assault on Christopher Bryson, and he didn't allow officers into his house, so they got a
Search
a
warrant?
search warrant for his house. And then they found all kinds of shit, like the electrical transformer, syringes, bottles of prescription drugs, restraints, all this shit. And so they were like, yeah, this is the guy. And then they also found, just super disturbing, is a human skull in a closet on the second floor. They found a partially decomposed human head in the backyard. They also found the hacksaw and knife stowed in the hallway and several human teeth. Yeah. And then also in the chainsaw, they like swabbed the chainsaw and they found like bloodstains, flesh, and pubic hairs.
Oh.
And then they took luminol, which that just sounds awful right off the bat, that they're going to go luminol this place because his entire second floor and his basement were just lit up like a Christmas tree because it was just covered in blood. They found a total
meticulous about cleaning.
I mean, you just can't. They found a total of 334 Polaroid pictures and 34 snapshot prints of various males who were found, some alive, some dead. And then they also found the needles and the pornographic literature, and then a book devoted to the creation of narcotics. So he was super into drugging people. And then they found his log or his journal, which was, hard evidence that he did all this shit. The skull found inside of Berdella's closet was identified with dental x-rays to be that of Robert Sheldon's. And the same dental identification was made on Sheldon's skull. 2 men separately phoned called the Kansas City Police Department to state that one of the 7 unidentified young men depicted in a photograph released to the media on April 27th was a former high school acquaintance of theirs named Mark Wallace. So these guys called in because I guess Mark Wallace wasn't identified. So I guess that was good that they could identify him. A grand jury on July 22nd, 1988 formally indicted Berdella for the murder of Larry Wayne Pearson. The following month, he was arraigned and pleaded guilty in the 4th Circuit of Jackson County Court before the judge to first-degree murder of Larry Pearson. And he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Upon being sentenced, Berdella was transferred to the Missouri State Penitentiary to commence his life sentence. So that's where he was. He was later temporarily placed in protective custody due to concerns for his safety, because I guess all these people wanted to kill him because he was an awful person. But that happens a lot in prison.
Yeah.
People get killed. He later on agreed to confess in graphic detail precisely what he did and who he killed and how he killed them and what he did with their bodies. The confessions were given to prosecutors in 1988. In return, the prosecution agreed to not seek the death penalty. So I guess he confessed to everything that he did just so that they could get a full confession out of him, and then they couldn't put him to death. So this was a quote from him. "These were not people that I thought of. Once I had them bound and were using them, they became something other than people to me. I never thought it out to the level of, what if one of the bodies ever gets loose?"
The bodies.
The bodies.
Not the people.
Wow.
But the bodies.
Yep.
What a psycho.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get over that ammonia in the eye.
He eventually died in
And
prison
Drano in the mouth.
from a heart attack.
Good.
No, I think I'd
At
rather
43
him...
years old.
How old?
43.
Only 43?
Yeah. He was super young when he did all this shit.
Wow.
Well, at least he didn't live a long life.
This is what the judge said when he found out. The judge said, couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
Oh, man.
Well, Robert Andrew Berdella Jr.
I don't remember. But I was thinking, and all these crimes, like, they really bring it down, and maybe we should switch it around. So we start with the crime, and then we end with something that's happy and poppy.
Poppy seeds
Tell
to
us
distract
your
the
thoughts.
demons.
Yep.
Distract the
was
demons.
That was definitely the best.
That's it.
Like, little
Should we start
tidbit.
calling our listeners poppy seeds? Hey,
Because they're all distracting demons.
Yeah. And
Oh, that's kind of cute.
Poppies is
let
nice,
us know
though.
how you
Yeah,
want us
little
to call
poppies.
You poppies.
What do you want us to call you?
Hey, because we don't know what to call you. Hey, people.
I also really like winos, even though that's a thing, but
It's already a thing.
so is creepers. And,
I know that's
one
why
of my shows.
I think Poppies is cute.
Poppies is cute.
They also distract demons. So
They're useful.
useful and cute.
That's the way I want to live my life.
And cute. So this has been episode 12, La Boulangerie.
La Boulangerie.
Thank you
Baloney.
again,
Baloney.
Brandon, for the delicious wine. We really enjoyed
Thanks,
it.
Brandon.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you guys for listening, because this episode has been really fun and I enjoyed it.
yeah,
Hope
I
you
feel like
did
we
too.
talked about a lot of really interesting things. The
So much
folklore
information.
was really interesting.
I do
That
love
murder
folklore.
was like,
Intense.
yeah,
If you saw his picture, I think you would recognize him.
I'm interested.
Like, if you saw his picture, would you be like, okay, if I went up to this guy's door, I would not stay in his home?
He's got a porn stash.
Oh, I gotta Google it. I guess I
Google
gotta Google it.
All right.
But yeah, so... Oh, I would not stay in his home.
definitely not.
Yeah, nope.
He looks like a creepy monk.
Yep.
Like, not like as in a monk, like as in the actor that played monk. like,
I love him. No, Robert Berdella was
Not attractive.
he was creepy as shit.
the fact
don't
that
like
he
it.
died at 43, he looks 43 in that picture.
He looked 53 in that picture.
And this was from his bookshop. So anyway, this was like early on in his life. All right.
It's been real and it's been fun.
But
And
has it
it's-
been real fun?
I was gonna say it's been pretty fun.
I think it's been fun.
yeah.
Follow us on all of the social media accounts at Pop Crime and Wine.
And we will.
See you next Tuesday.
Bow, chicka, bow. Hello.
Checking 1, 2.
Hey there.
Checking all the checks.
Check.
Check.
Pink pajamas, penguins on the bottom.
Pink pajamas, penguins on the bottom. Pink pajamas, penguins on the bottom. Pink pajamas, penguins on the bottom.